So, hello, Craig. Thank you for joining me on my channel again.
Hello, Ben. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me back on.
No, you're very welcome as always. I think most of the viewers to my channel know of you already. They may have seen the videos we made previously on the C1 Advanced and C2 Proficiency speaking papers, in which we practiced the different tasks. But I do have some new subscribers, so could you perhaps just give a brief introduction to my viewers?
Yes, with pleasure. So, if you don't know me, my name's Craig. Like Ben, I was born and raised in the UK, but I now live in Spain. And I'm not an official Cambridge examiner at the moment, but I was for 23 years. I worked for the British Council teaching Cambridge exams and as an examiner, an oral examiner. And now I teach online, mainly conversation classes on the internet.
So, what we're going to be doing today is talking about the typical mistakes that students make in the speaking paper of the Cambridge English exam. So, we're really focusing on the B2 first, C1 advanced, and C2 proficiency. Now, I've spoken about this in previous videos and in my online courses, but it's really useful to get the examiner's perspective. And I think we're really lucky to have Craig who can give us that perspective.
I hope I don't let you down, Ben. I hope I can live up to your introduction.
I'm sure you will. Don't worry. I'm sure you will. You always do, Craig. So no pressure. Okay. So in a moment, we're going to talk about the typical mistakes that students make in the speaking test itself. So during the test. But first of all, I just wanted to talk about perhaps mistakes they make before the test, before the exam, perhaps things they don't get quite right. So Craig, what are the typical mistakes students make before actually doing the speaking exam?
I think in general, the reason for failing the exam, generally speaking, is not having the level, and that's true in the speaking as true as it is in the other areas of the exam. So make sure you do have the level before you register for the exam and take it.
Mm.
Now you can do practice tests for the other part of the exam, and you can see if you've got that 60% or more. But the speaking's a bit trickier, isn't it, Ben? I mean,
Yeah.
not having the speaking level, you really need to be speaking with a teacher like yourself so that you can see if you have the level or not to even register and take the exam.
Yeah, that is a typical mistake that students make, perhaps choosing an exam which is above their level that perhaps it will be difficult for them to pass. And as you said, you can do the reading and use of English tasks, the listening tasks, even the writing, and get an idea of whether your level is sufficient for the exam you want to take. Speaking is more difficult. So you can watch YouTube videos. I mean, the official Cambridge YouTube videos of the speaking paper, or I've made some YouTube videos with students who've taken practiced the speaking paper with me. But it is tricky. Yeah, you want to be realistic.
Exactly. So having said that, let's say you do have the level for the C1, the B2, or the proficiency exam, not knowing the format is another big mistake I've seen in the past. So a student will have the level, they might even be well and above the level that they need, but they come into the examining room and they sit down and I ask questions according to the rubric, the text I have to go through the exam, and they have no idea
Mm.
what's going to happen, what they have to do in each task. And even though I tell them the instructions, that can be a big problem for students who even do have the level, that they just don't know the different parts of the exam, what happens in each section, how much time they have, and what they're expected to do with each task.
Yeah, that's extremely important. As you said, that the interlocutor will give the instructions for each part of the exam, but it's such an advantage if you know the format beforehand. So you're very familiar with exactly what you have to do in each part. I have a little phrase that I say to my students that is true for the whole exam, but especially the speaking paper, and that's don't be scared, be prepared. I mean, it's true. The more prepared you are, and the better you know the test format, the less nervous you will be. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges of the speaking paper is sort of overcoming your nerves. So if you know what to expect, you know what the tasks are, you should be less nervous and you can focus on doing the task rather than trying to understand what the format is. Just an extra question, Craig, I'd love to know the examiner's perspective on this. How how easy is it for an examiner, or how quickly can you tell whether a student has prepared for the speaking paper or not? I mean, I always recommend, of course, that you should prepare and should get to know the format and everything, but can you tell immediately, or does it depend on the candidate?
It's a good question. There are signs, for example, when the two candidates come in, because normally you take the exam with a partner, and I'll say the name of the person. So I'll say, Juan, where do you live? Where are you from? If that person then turns to their partner and asks their partner a question,
Mm,
I'm thinking, well, I didn't. There's no reason for you to interact now with your
mm,
partner. You're supposed to
yeah.
be talking to me. That's one sign. Another sign, they might not necessarily know that they need to discuss pictures
Hmm.
before they reach a conclusion. They reach a conclusion in the first 10 seconds, and then that's the second part of the task. So
Right.
really not knowing the format of the exam can put you in a position where you lose marks, and you don't want that to happen.
I mean, it is possible to pass the exam without preparing, but it's much more difficult, and you're not going to get the score you could get if you practiced and if you
Exactly.
prepared. So especially the speaking paper, because nerves are such a big part of it.
Mhm.
Um, and what about practicing for the speaking paper? I mean, that's, as you said, it's quite difficult because with the other parts you can practice on your own, but with the speaking paper, it really helps if you have a partner. So do you have any tips for that, Craig?
Yes, that's another thing that can cause problems, not practicing for the exams. So obviously the best thing to do is to practice with an experienced teacher like Ben. But if you would like to practice by yourself, then you really need a friend. You need to grab somebody. Maybe it's a member of your family or a classmate if you're studying in an academy, somebody who more or less has the same level as you, and just go through the format of the exam, practicing with a friend, with your
Mm.
grandmother, whoever is available. It doesn't matter. You're just practicing, and the more you practice, the more relaxed you will be in the exam. You could practice with a mirror if there's no
Mhm.
one around. Speak to the mirror, look at yourself, practice your body language, have some example questions that you want to answer. But it's really, excuse me, really
Mhm.
effective to record your voice on your phone and listen back. In some exams, you have to speak by yourself. There's a monologue for 60 seconds or 2 minutes. So do that on your phone, listen back. Can you improve it? How's your pronunciation? Did you make any mistakes with collocation or grammar? Record it again, listen back, record it again. That's very, very powerful. Of course, if you do it with video, you can also see your body language and how the examiner would be seeing you. There's also voice recognition and AI programs that you can use to have a conversation and answer questions. One I'd recommend is talkpal.ai, and that's an AI computer that sounds like a human, and that computer will ask you lots of questions, and then you reply to the questions in English to practice.
Yeah, I think there are no excuses anymore, really. I think people often say, I don't have anybody to practice with, but now with the technology we have available, and now with these new AI options, very few excuses. In fact, it could be that teachers will become redundant in the
Well,
next
let's
few
not let's
years.
not hope so. We have to earn our money and keep the lights on, Ben. Got to earn our money
Exactly. Yeah.
somehow.
But yeah, I'm worried, to be honest, Craig. But no, I
We
think
need to invent more phrasal verbs. That's what we need to do to get the
yeah,
students coming in the door with more phrasal
it's
verbs.
just make it more difficult to keep ahead of the AI. But yeah, some great tips there. I think it's so important that you practice in some way before the exam, even if it's just on your own, because if the first time you practice or do these tasks is on the day of the exam, you're going to be more nervous. You're going to find it very difficult. You're going to probably get confused and lost. The timing is extremely important, just to get an idea for how long you're expected to speak for each task, and just get a feel for doing the tasks. It's such an advantage. So moving on to during the speaking exam itself. So yeah, Craig, from the examiner's perspective, what are some of the most common mistakes that candidates make during the speaking paper?
Well, one that comes to mind is that students don't speak loudly and clearly. So they tend to do this. That's called mumbling. Don't
Mm-hmm.
mumble. I'll tell you why. There's an examiner that's sitting in front of you asking you questions. He or she will be sitting quite close. But in the Cambridge exams, there's also another examiner who is listening and giving you marks and maybe is sitting in the corner of the room. That person needs to hear you, because if that person doesn't hear you, you will get a big round 0. So speak loudly and clearly. And remember, if you're a little bit nervous, your voice might get a bit softer.
It's so important. Yeah. And people, as you said, when people get nervous, you don't realize how you're actually projecting. If you just make a conscious effort. And also, I think you can come across as being a little more confident, right? When you project. And that's important. I think the impression that you make on the examiner is important. If you come across as nervous and not confident with your English, then that can affect the way that the examiner perceives your level, I guess. Craig, is that true?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also important to speak confidently and accurately about your job, your family, your hobbies, the area where you live. That kind of vocabulary can be prepared before. You know, you're probably going to be asked where you live, and you might be asked about your job, your profession, what you do, your family, your hobbies. So you can prepare that a little before the exam.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you can do that. And another point is always answer the question. For example, if you're asked to compare two photos, the language of comparison is really important, because you've been asked to compare the photos, not only describe. That's another mistake I often see. They'll say, oh, in this picture, there's a boy riding a bicycle, and then they give a lovely description of the boy on the bicycle. And in this picture, there's somebody swimming in a swimming pool. But you need to compare and say how the photos are the same and how they're different. So listen very carefully to the instructions. And that goes back to my first point about knowing the format of the exam, what instructions are going to be given, what you expect to do in each task.
Yeah, because the tasks are basically the same. As you said, with the B2 first and C1 advanced part 2, you have to compare pictures and answer a question. The task is always the same, right? The content is different, the pictures will be different, and the questions will be different, but the task is always the same. So
Exactly.
it can almost be automatic. You know how to do the task, and just remember to compare. Craig, you mentioned vocabulary there. You touched on vocabulary, and that's a big issue in the speaking paper, because when I practice with my students, when they finish a task, I always ask them to give their own feedback. And they say, yeah, it was okay, but I didn't really use much advanced vocabulary. And my response to that is, yeah, that's true, maybe. And of course, it's great if you can use some nice advanced expressions or words or collocations, but it shouldn't come at the expense of your fluency or your interaction in the collaborative tasks. Because I think the problem that sometimes happens, the issue that students have is that when they're trying to find a particular word, the precise word, they have to stop, they have to interrupt their flow, and for a couple of seconds perhaps look for that word. And sometimes they don't even find the word. So they've wasted that time and they've interrupted the flow. So from the examiner's point of view, Craig, what's your advice there? I mean, how important is vocabulary in the speaking paper?
Well, I agree with everything you said, Ben. I mean, absolutely. It's better to be fluent and use maybe a simpler vocabulary than to try and look for those really wonderful, highbrow, advanced words that cause you to hesitate and stop, or worse, use a word in your language because you can't think of the word you want. So no, don't do that. Um, Basically, if you don't have the level of vocabulary to pass the exam, it's going to be difficult to pass the exam. You need to have the level. What I would suggest is that in course books, for example, for the different Cambridge exams, they focus a lot on the vocabulary you need for whatever topic may come up or appear in the exam. For example, the environment, technology, travel, work, family, communication, fashion, making predictions about the future. So you need to study these areas before the exam, which you may be doing in a course anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'll have the vocabulary you need to do the task.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, there are, of course, words and expressions you can use. You made a short video recently, Ben, about "for want of a better word," which is an expression you can learn and you can use in any exam. So apart from studying the relevant vocabulary, I'd also suggest learning some set phrases for asking opinion, giving opinion, agreeing, disagreeing, clarifying, and you can use those expressions in any exam.
Yeah, I think that's very important because it's great if you can use topic-specific vocabulary. So whatever the vocabulary related to the question that has been asked. But yeah, there are certain words and phrases and fixed expressions that you can use in almost any task. And learn synonyms. I mean, I've made videos on lots of videos on lists of vocabulary, but I like to focus on synonyms for basic words. Like I always talk about important because important comes up a lot in the exam. So important or very important, and that's a fine adjective. There's nothing wrong with the adjective important, but there are so many synonyms, so many alternatives of paramount importance, crucial, critical, essential, pivotal. So you can use, instead of just repeating important or very important all the time, learn some synonyms. You don't need to learn all the synonyms, just a few, and synonyms for other typical words that could come up, just to demonstrate that you have a wide range of vocabulary, whatever the topic may be. But yeah, I think it's great if you can use some impressive vocabulary, but don't let it sacrifice your fluency. And you have the writing paper to really demonstrate your range of vocabulary. Of course, they're evaluated separately, but I think that's, the examiners expect to see a higher level of vocabulary in your writing because you have more time to think about what you're writing.
Can I just add one more thing to that? Because I think there is a danger, something that I've seen in exams, is that a student will learn a phrase, let's say it's "so to speak," that little chunk, that little piece of language, "so to speak," which is a lovely expression to use in an exam, but only once or maybe twice. And I have students come into the room and they'll end every sentence with "so to speak." Where are you from, Ben? Oh, I'm from London, so to speak.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
no, but that's a big problem. So yes, learn these expressions that are really effective, but use them sparingly. Use them only once or twice, and learn a selection of them to show your variety of vocabulary.
Before we move on, I did just want to remind people that Craig is not just a former examiner. As I said at the beginning, he is an English teacher, and he also offers these conversation courses. Perhaps, Craig, you could just elaborate on that a little.
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, they're very informal, very relaxed group conversation classes online, where I get together with a small group of lovely people who are interested in improving their conversation, their speaking, their confidence in English. And we have discussions, role plays, debates focused around topics. And we meet on Zoom in small groups. And then after the class, there's the opportunity for the students to send me a recorded message of their speaking, and I'll give personal feedback on how they can improve. So that's basically what happens during the course. The course is run throughout the year. And if you'd like more information, you can send me an email, Craig, Craig, @inglespodcast.com. That's my email address. I do have a website. It's englishcraig.com, but it's work in progress. There's some information there, but probably the most effective way is to send me an email.
Fantastic, and I'll share those links, your email and the website in the description.
Thanks, Ben.
So you can get in touch with Craig. So let's continue with the typical mistakes that people tend to make in the speaking paper. Craig, do you have any others?
Yes, some students more at lower levels, for example, B1, sometimes B2, sometimes at B1, C1, sometimes at B1, all the Bs and all the Cs, except C2 maybe, but they don't answer in an extended way. So not answering the question, extending the question. So always give an extended answer. For example, If I say, do you enjoy studying English? Yes. Okay, it's a yes no question. You need to add that magic word because.
Mhm.
Yes, I love studying English because when I travel, I can communicate with people, give a reason why,
Mhm.
extend your answer because you're there to speak. And if you're speaking too much, the examiner will stop you. So don't worry about that. You should worry about speaking too little, not speaking
Mhm.
enough.
Yeah, excellent tip. I always say to my students, you're not going to be able to. It's very difficult to give the perfect length of an answer because you can't judge time, and also it depends on the examiner. Some examiners give you a little bit more time for one question than another, and the examiner, the interlocutor, will interrupt you if and when necessary. So it's always better to speak too much than too little, as Craig says. And yeah, expand on your answers. Just ask yourself why, if necessary, when you answer, because the examiner may ask you why. They may say, do you like studying English? Yes. Why? But you don't want the examiner to do that. You want to do that yourself. So just ask yourself why. Okay, yes, why do I like? Okay, and then as Craig said, because it's kind of common sense, but in an exam situation when you're nervous, yeah, I've seen it. Just candidates can forget or just that they don't take full advantage of the opportunity they have.
I have
Uh,
another one here for you.
okay.
Not listening carefully to instructions. Make sure that you listen very carefully to what the examiner says and also pay attention to what your partner says because you may be asked to comment on what they say. Sometimes in tests in the past, I've asked the candidate a question and they've answered very well. And then I turn to the other candidate and I say, and what about you? And they look at me with that deer in the headlights look. Me,
Panic.
what about me? What? Because they didn't listen. They didn't listen to what their partner said. So they
Yeah.
can't comment on it. So you always have to be aware. You have to be on your toes. You have to be paying attention during the exam, not only to what the examiner says, but your partner's opinion, what your partner's saying, so that you can agree or disagree with what your partner said.
Yeah, that's so true. And I've seen that when I've practiced in my classes. I think what often happens is that a candidate, a student is analyzing themselves or analyzing their own performance. So maybe they've spoken, maybe they've given their answer to the question, and their partner is responding, but they're not really paying attention because they think, oh, I didn't use that word here, or I made a mistake here. What did I do? And as you said, either the partner may say, "Do you agree?" or the interlocutor may say, "How about you?" And they're not paying attention. So it's just being very aware of your partner and of the interlocutor and just what's happening around you. And of course, a big part of paying attention, I think, in my opinion, is body language, right? How you position yourself. And again, it's kind of common sense and natural, but in an exam situation, maybe when you're nervous, you don't act in a way you perhaps normally would in a natural situation.
I happen to think, and I don't know if you agree, Ben, but I think a lot of teachers don't put enough emphasis on body language. And I know if you're a Cambridge examiner, you're not supposed to be paying attention to body language. It's not something that the students are marked on. It's not something you can listen for, but I think subconsciously it does affect your performance. For example, when you go into the room, make sure you're smiling, try as much as possible to relax and have open, positive body language. Sometimes I see students trying to make themselves as small as possible. Like, you can't see me. I'm not here. No, you've got to be present in a job interview, in an English test. You've got to be friendly, open body language, use your hands when you're explaining things, maintain eye contact with the examiner. Don't look down at your feet all the time. Look at your partner when it's appropriate. Make sure you're making eye contact and looking at your partner when you're doing collaborative tasks. I think that's important. It creates a positive impression and it makes you feel better. It makes you feel more of an extrovert, with more confident if you're working on your body language, which is something you can practice in front of the mirror as well at home.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned it makes you appear more of an extrovert, but you may not be. You may be an introvert, but it's kind of like a performance, isn't it? It's not a natural situation. It's artificial, but The whole speaking test lasts about 15 or 16 minutes, so it's going to be over very quickly. So you may have to be performing like an actor in many ways. But
what's the expression? Fake it till you make it. And
mm-hmm.
let's face it, Ben, these situations are not natural situations. A job interview is not a natural situation. A language test, a speaking test, describing two pictures in front of a native speaker, that's not a natural situation. So why not be an extrovert for 15 minutes? Why
Mm-hmm.
not show them how good your English is and come out of your skin and be that extrovert, that friendly person, even if really on a day-to-day basis you are quite shy and nervous. You need to show them how good your English is, and be a bit more interactive than maybe you normally are.
Yeah, it is possible. I know from personal experience, and I think, and I know people are going to laugh when I say this, but try and have fun. I mean, I know it sounds like the last thing you're going
Like going to the
to do.
dentist.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a pleasant experience, but if you can just try before you walk in to the examination room, just think, I'm going to try and enjoy this. I know maybe you feel pressure, and it's, you're being judged and evaluated, and nobody particularly enjoys that. But if you can just think, I'm going to try and have fun, perhaps it would just change your mindset a little bit and see it as an opportunity. They're giving you this opportunity to demonstrate your levels, so take advantage of it.
That's a very good piece of advice.
Mm-hmm.
And another point that's occurred to me during the interactive part of many speaking tests is where a speaker will speak for too long, and they'll take the conversation away from their partner. Very often you're being marked on interactive communication, which means how interactive are you with the examiner and with your partner. So I like to say, think of the interaction with your partner as a game of tennis. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
marathon. You're not running on your own and then your partner starts speaking after. It's a tennis match, ping pong, ping pong. So you say something, ask your partner if they agree, ask your partner what their opinion is. A mistake I often see is not that. They don't do that. They just speak for 40 seconds, which is a long time in a speaking test, and then they'll stop, and maybe their partner will start speaking. That's not really interacting.
Yeah.
You need to be constantly asking questions, constantly commenting on what your partner says, so that you have that tennis match, that ping pong chat between the two of you, which is good interaction.
Yeah, it's so important. They're called collaborative tasks. You should be collaborating and interacting and um, responding to your partner. That's one of the worst, one of the biggest mistakes actually I see students making the collaborative tasks. It's just two monologues. It's like one student will give their answer to the question, the other student will give their answer to the question. There's absolutely no interaction. There's no response. There's no, you should always finish by saying, what do you think? What's your opinion? What's your stance on this? How do you
Exactly.
feel? And when you respond, you say, yeah, you make a good point, or yeah, I agree to a certain extent, or I beg to differ. Whatever, just signal to the examiners that you have listened and you're responding, and then you can say what you wanted to say, but at least there is some kind of linking between the two contributions, not monologues. You don't want monologues in the interactive tasks or the collaborative tasks.
Yeah. Another thing I notice sometimes, and I'm probably guilty of doing it here, because I'm aware and conscious that I'm being recorded, that this is going out on YouTube. Many times in these situations, people speak too quickly. I've noticed that when I've given presentations in the past. I'll prepare a presentation, I'll time it for 30 minutes. But when I actually do the presentation, it's 24 minutes. I've spoken too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That happens very often to students in the exam as well. They swallow words, they're
Mm-hmm.
nervous, they're not speaking clearly. Slow down. There's no rush. I think if people speak more slowly, it gives you time to think more of what you're going to say, so you can select your vocabulary. You don't have those annoying and I and then let me you don't have those hesitation noises so much
Mm-hmm.
when you slow down and you leave pauses. And leaving pauses also makes your English more effective.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I'm constantly working on with my students in the conversation groups, is to slow down, think of what you're going to say. There's no rush. Express yourself clearly, speak. I don't know if you agree with that, Ben, but I think it's very important.
100%, yeah, because I think speaking, another advantage and benefit of speaking slowly is that you come across as being more confident. I think people often confuse or mistake fluency with speaking quickly. They think a fluent speaker speaks quickly, but if you think of the best speakers in the history, they generally speak slowly. They're very calm and slow, and as you said, they use pauses effectively. I mean, the problem with the exams, especially Cambridge English exams, is you generally have very little time to speak. But it's not about speaking quickly; it's about speaking fluently and confidently, and when necessary, interacting with your partner. So yeah, that's a very important tip. Yeah. Any other tips, Craig, or have we covered everything?
Don't panic
Mm-hmm.
if the examiner stops you.
Yeah.
As an examiner, I was taught to say thank you when I wanted the candidate to stop speaking. So you're answering a question. I've already said don't just use one word when you answer. Extend your answer. So the candidate's extending their answer, and I need to give the other candidate their time to speak. So I say thank you, and then I ask another question. Just keep speaking until you hear the examiner say thank you. And don't panic when you are stopped or if you are stopped in the middle of a sentence. That is not because you've done something incorrect or bad. That's because the exam is very structured with tasks and with time. So the examiner has to be fair to every candidate and give every candidate more or less the same amount of time to speak.
And you don't have to worry about coming to any conclusion in these tasks. I think that's a mistake some students make. They say, to sum up, or in conclusion, or in a nutshell. That's dangerous, because what if you're concluding and you still have more time to speak? So just keep on speaking, as Craig says, and the interlocutor is monitoring the time. You don't have to worry so much about the time. Just make sure you do what is asked of you, complete the task.
Exactly. And one more thing before we wrap up. Correct yourself if you hear yourself making a mistake. You've been asked where you're from. Say, I was born in London. If you notice you've made a mistake, correct it immediately. And that way the examiner knows that you know the correct grammar or the correct collocation, but you've just made a slip, a small error, and you've corrected yourself, and you won't lose any marks.
Yeah, so you stop that other examiner, the assessor, who's sitting in the corner, who's probably is waiting to catch you out with the mistakes, and they're just about to note that mistake. And
got that red pen just about to. Oh no, he knows the grammar. Okay,
yeah,
no
got
problem.
that one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't do that like 20 seconds later though. Don't, if you remember that you made a mistake 20 seconds ago.
At the end of the test, do you remember when I used the present perfect? I really meant to use the past simple. No, don't do
exactly.
that.
That's
Immediately at the same time, correct yourself.
Yeah, that's very important. Yeah, fantastic, Craig. Thank you very much for that. I think you've shared some really useful tips, so useful and so valuable to get an examiner's point of view on the typical mistakes that students make. So I'm sure all the viewers have got a lot of valuable information there. Anyone watching this who's taken the exam before, or maybe you are preparing for the exam now, if you have any other tips, or if you think there are other mistakes that we've missed, then feel free to share them in the comments. But that's about it. So Craig, again, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. I'm sure we'll have you on the channel again.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you for having me on, Ben. Really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. If you're taking the exam, good luck.